Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Steve Karakis with the Nuclear Energy Institute, and I'll introduce our panelists here in just a second. We're delighted that you could join us today for an announcement regarding interim consolidated storage of used nuclear fuel. What I would like to do is remind everyone just that we don't deal with and store and all those things with used nuclear fuel. We don't do that just for the sake of having used nuclear fuel. It is a byproduct of something very important in our society, which is the reliable generation of about 20% of our nation's electricity, far and away our leading source of carbon-free electricity. They've got winter weather pounding them in New England again. You've got nuclear energy facilities up there that are really helping to meet that load, and they do that wintertime, summertime, literally year-round, almost 24/7. So that's the value to our society. Used nuclear fuel is a byproduct of that process, but just to help remind folks of that. With that, I'd like to introduce our panel members who will, three of whom at least will have some opening remarks briefly, and then we will turn it open to your questions. I would, because we do have phone lines open, so if you would please let me come around with a microphone before you ask your question so that we can make sure that those who are listening in can do that and hear the question as well as the answer. So first we've got Beverly Marshall, M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L. Beverly's a Senior Director for Federal Programs with NEI. To her left is Bill Lindquist, L-I-N-D-Q-U-I-S-T. Bill is the Chief Executive Officer for Waste Control Specialists. To his left, Rod Baltzer, B-A-L-T-Z-E-R. Rod is President of Waste Control Specialists. Then last but not least, we've got Michael McMahon, M-C, capital M-A-H-O-N. Mike is Senior Vice President, AREVA TN Americas. AREVA is a participant in this project. And then I'd also, it's interesting, for those of you, if you didn't see today's editorial in the Washington Post, back to Yucca Mountain, there is language in here toward the end. In the world we have, however, Nevadans are entrenched in opposition, and the Obama administration is determined to put a long-term storage facility only in a place that would welcome it. And that's part of the answer we get today, is a facility that does want this material. I would also note for those either here in our audience or on the phone, there's also a statement that's in the press kits that are available today from Congressman Mike Conaway of the 11th District of Texas. We're happy to provide that to you. Just you could send me an email directly after the fact, if need be, sck@nei.org, and we'll get you that statement if you need it. With that, I'll turn the floor open to Beverly.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to join Steve today in saying welcome and thank you for joining us. I want to take a few minutes and provide some background and context for Waste Control Specialists' announcement regarding the company's interest in hosting an interim consolidated storage facility. As Steve mentioned, commercial used nuclear fuel is a byproduct of electricity generation from carbon-free nuclear energy. Nuclear energy generates approximately 20% of the electricity and almost 2/3 of the carbon-free electricity across America. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act established the Nuclear Waste Fund and the Nuclear Waste Fee, by which the industry pays for the disposal of used nuclear fuel. The Nuclear Waste Fund has a balance of more than $30 billion and earns interest of more than $1 billion a year. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act also required the Department of Energy to begin accepting used fuel from commercial nuclear facilities in 1998. Of course, DOE missed that date, and energy companies have been suing the department to recover damages for this breach of contract. These damages are paid from the taxpayer-funded judgment fund. DOE estimates the total liability for the federal government at about $27 billion, including $4.5 billion already paid to these companies. This estimate assumes that the department begins accepting used nuclear fuel in 2021. The industry is committed to restarting a sustainable federal program. To this end, we are advocating the completion of the Yucca Mountain Repository, the establishment of a new management entity dedicated to solely executing a high-level radioactive waste disposal program and empowered with the authority and resources to succeed, funding reform to provide access to the Nuclear Waste Fund for its intended purpose, and establishing an interim consolidated storage facility in a willing host community and state. It is industry's view that consent-based consolidated storage is the quickest route for the federal government to begin moving commercial used nuclear fuel and to begin reducing the taxpayers' liabilities. Interim consolidated storage is not the complete solution, but it is a prudent investment while continuing to pursue geologic disposal. It would complement the repository program and provide a contingency in case the repository program continues to suffer significant delay. Because the technology is proven, the industry is confident that an interim consolidated storage facility can be operational in 10 years, if not sooner, in a willing community and state. The industry supports the efforts of waste control specialists and other communities and states as they demonstrate their interest in hosting nuclear fuel storage facilities. Today's announcement is a significant development and could enable the federal government to meet its statutory obligation and begin moving used fuel before a repository is open. We urge Congress to authorize and fund DOE to implement an interim consolidated storage program to explore the unique opportunity that the WCS project or future projects may present. Energy companies, their local communities and states, and American taxpayers deserve a federal program that will meet its obligation to safely and securely take title to, transport, store, and ultimately dispose of used nuclear fuel and high-level radioactive waste. Until that time, the industry will continue to manage used nuclear fuel safely and securely. At the same time, we will work with Congress to restart a sustainable program that will meet the Energy Department's obligations and reduce taxpayer liability as quickly as possible. I now welcome Bill Lindquist from Waste Control Specialists to discuss the Andrews County project and the opportunity it presents for their community, for Texas, and for our whole country.
Thank you, Beverly. I also want to thank you for being here as well, and I want to thank NEI for hosting, as well as the National Press Club. On Friday, Waste Control Specialists filed a letter of intent with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, informing the Commission of our intent to seek a license to operate a used fuel storage facility at our Andrews, Texas county facility. We intend to work with Areva, a global leader in used nuclear fuel management and transportation, to help us provide a safe and comprehensive solution for this material, which has been accumulating at utility sites and for which our nation has been struggling to develop a comprehensive management system. We are serious and committed to this project. I fully intend to have a formal license submitted in a little over a year by April of 2016. We believe the NRC can issue an interim storage license by the summer of 2019, and we can begin construction immediately and be in a position to begin accepting used fuel for storage by the end of 2020. This will be a community-supported, consent-based facility, just as our current nuclear facilities are. The community and the region have already been apprised of the proposal. Andrews County has passed a unanimous resolution of support, and Texas elected officials have been well briefed on our plans, and we will continue to update them as the process moves along. While this is obviously a federal license we are seeking, we're well aware that we must keep the state, local, and regional authorities informed, engaged, and supportive. We've been doing exactly that for the last 20 years, and this effort will be no different. We are asking for a federal license and not a federal handout. WCS will not seek any federal or state funding for either licensing or constructing the used fuel storage facility. Before I ask WCS President Rod Balzer to come up and give you some more details about our current operations and our plans for the interim storage, I would like to close on this note. Some of you will scoff at our timeline. You'll say that we've been wrestling with this issue for 40 years, and here comes a small Texas company saying they expect to begin solving this problem in just 5 years from today, and that's not possible. Well, I beg to differ. History would say that we can do this. Since early in the 1980s, when Congress was initially addressing the issue of handling the back end of the nuclear fuel cycle, I know of only one community that actively embraced the challenge, one community that worked in unison with the confidence to say this can be done safely and securely. That community is Andrews, Texas. There's been exactly one state that has fulfilled the mandate of the Low-Level Radioactive Waste Policy Act passed by Congress in 1980. One state has successfully sited, built, and is now operating a low-level radioactive waste facility. That one state is Texas. And there's been only one company that has made more than a $500 million investment to license, construct, and operate a nuclear waste facility, and that is Waste Control Specialists. We know how to do this. We know the key is open and honest communication with the community, the state, and now the federal government. That dialogue is well underway, and as of today, it begins in Washington. Rod, why don't you come up here and give some additional information? Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I want to begin by echoing one thing that Bill already said. This will be a community-supported, consent-based facility. We appreciate the Blue Ribbon Committee introducing the term in the used fuel debate here in Washington, but we've been doing everything related to our site in Texas on a consent basis for a long, long time. And as we are well aware, it is the only way a facility like this can exist. WCS currently operates 2 licensed disposal facilities, the Texas Compact Facility and the Federal Waste Facility, on a 14,000-acre site in West Texas. We have the ideal location, an experienced workforce, an impeccable safety record, and a community that understands and supports this industry. Our facilities are situated in an arid, isolated part of the state. Because we've already gone through a 5-year licensing process to obtain our low-level disposal licenses, we offer one of the most geologically studied areas in the country. We're the only privately owned and operated facility in the United States that can treat, store, and dispose of Class A, B, and C low-level radioactive waste. We may need legislative changes or policy clarifications to ensure that an interim storage facility will fit seamlessly into a national program of used fuel management. We believe our interim storage proposal will provide an intermediate solution to a national problem and a commitment of good faith to the nuclear utilities and the American people. Construction of the used fuel storage facility will begin once legislative changes or policy clarifications are made and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has issued a license. Used fuel has been safely transported across the United States since 1965. More than 2,700 shipments have traveled more than 1.6 million miles. WCS will work with Areva, a global industry leader, who is highly experienced in the handling and transportation of used fuel worldwide. The primary operations performed at the used fuel storage facility will be transferring the used fuel safely contained in a steel canister from a transportation cask into an interim fuel storage system. The used fuel will not be removed from the permanent cask, which is a thick welded steel cylinder. The entire transfer process has been proven to be safe. The state of Texas maintains extensive active oversight of our facility through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, which monitors everything we do at our Andrews facility, and we expect that to continue as this process moves forward. We will be keeping the community and the public updated and informed as this process continues. To that end, we have launched an informational website, WCSstorage.com. We plan to utilize that and other media initiatives to keep the public engaged throughout this licensing process. We have learned from experience that maintaining open communications is a must if you're going to maintain the public trust. WCS is committed to providing an interim storage solution for the country. Under the most optimistic scenario, the United States is still decades away from having a permanent repository for this fuel. We already have several shut down nuclear power plants scattered across the country, each with used fuel stored on site in dry fuel storage systems. And more will be decommissioned in the future, leaving the used fuel stranded at individual sites. Until the debate over a disposal repository is resolved and the years necessary to license and construct that facility is completed, our nation needs a safe, centralized interim storage solution. We believe Andrews, Texas, and WCS provide that solution. Thank you.
We'll open up to questions. Again, please, if you would, just wait for the microphone.
Hi, Daniel Bloom from CQ Roll Call. Question for either Bill or Rod. So you've mentioned the consent-based process that was part of the BRC recommendation on America's nuclear future in 2012. Have you guys held public hearings yet in Andrews County to engage the public on this decision? And also, who will your customers be moving forward? I assume the 2 nuclear plants already operating in Texas, but who else are you guys envisioning will take part in agreements to have you guys store the waste?
We'll figure out how we split the answers to this. We'll probably both answer all of them, I would guess. On the public process, we had a all community meeting in the early part of December. We had 500 people attend out of a town of about 13,000 on a cold, wintry Monday night. We always figure that if you serve a barbecue dinner, you get a lot more people there, and that's what we did. So that we had that meeting. A lot of positive comments, a lot of questions, and what we have said to the community is that they're still learning about this whole process, and when the NRC takes the license initiative, there'll be several more public comment periods. Public meetings out in Andrews that they'll be able to attend as well. So they're well aware of what the process is going to be, and they understand that they're going to have a formalized process for them to comment on the license as well.
Yeah, I'd just add to that resulted in Andrews County issuing a county resolution, and a copy of that resolution should be in your press packet as well. As far as customers, the Department of Energy is responsible for used fuel, and so they would actually take title to this as it leaves the nuclear power plants and would be our customer for storage of that material as well.
Hi, Gugaratz with Argus Media. What is the cost of building the facility you propose, and how much can you store there on an interim basis?
So we're still obviously very early on in the process. It depends what the license conditions are and what we're required to do as we go through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission process. So that cost and of exactly what that'll cost is still a little undetermined. But we think that is a challenge we can meet, and that's why we also have put in the placeholder that we need to have either legislative changes or policy clarifications to make sure a company like ours could get paid for this, for storing the material, as well as have a license in hand to make sure construction of a facility like that is worthwhile.
Yeah, as Rod mentioned in his opening comments, when we get further along, we will, if we can't get, when we get to the point of deciding whether to do construction or not, we'll look to see what has happened in terms of funding the proposal, funding the interim storage. The other thing is the site will be built out in phases. So we'll start with a 100-acre facility, and then it would have the ability to grow from there. We're on 14,000 acres. We've got plenty of land to be able to build a facility. Not that we'd use all 14,000 acres, but I say that as a means of buffer, and we've got plenty of land to be able to expand and add to the capacity if we need to.
Thank you, Elaine Hiruo Platts. Part of DOE's strategy has included 2 storage facilities, a pilot for fuel from shutdown reactors and a larger consolidated. Are you going into this with a plan for one or the other, or is it going to be open to everyone? And a second question, how far can you get in the process without congressional action to pass new waste legislation?
Who wants to take the first one? I'll take the second.
So as far as fuel, yeah, we envision that this would be both spent nuclear fuel from nuclear utilities as well as high-level waste from the Department of Energy.
Well, I'm sorry, I was,
Was that the question?
well, and the closed,
Spent fuel from shutdown reactors.
yeah, I think, you know, how we did the low-level facility in Texas was we started with Texas waste first. It helps with the communities and the state to say that you're going to deal with their waste first. So I think to the extent that it is ready and available to ship, we would look at the 2 Texas facilities first. But after that, I think the plan would be to go for the plants that are no longer operational, so we can get that waste and have the land returned back to the communities where they're sited. On the second question, your question presupposes that we have to have legislation. I'm not a lawyer, but I think what your question is DOE, if we don't have legislation, the question is DOE able, under the rulings in the court, where they have now an obligation and they're incurring penalties, do they have the ability to fulfill that obligation by taking title to the waste and then shipping it to WCS or to some other interim facility under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act? I don't know the answer to that, but that's what your question presupposes. I think there is an interpretation out there that says DOE can do that they can enter into a contractual obligation to perform their duties and relieve their obligation. But as I said, I'm not a lawyer, so I didn't want you to go down the road to necessarily say that there has to be legislation.
Thank you. Michael Lindenberger with the Dallas Morning News. Can you give us just a little bit more detail about what you expect the project to cost, some range in terms of what your construction would be? And then ultimately, I mean, are we talking about, hundreds and hundreds or thousands of acres of these facilities if it builds out in your most optimistic hopes, or, 1 or 200 acres?
Well, we appreciate our local newspaper being here. Let you go ahead.
Yeah, I'll point to this chart on my left, and you can see a blue shaded area. That's phase 1. We've basically set aside approximately 1,000 acres. We think this will be in multiple phases. This phase 1 is just a small portion of that, and that would be for the first 10,000 or so metric tons, which should accommodate the permanently shut down reactors plus Texas. And so it would be built out in phases. As you look at, the president's budget just came out. They've apportioned, I think, $5.7 billion, but it includes interim storage, transportation, some significant work on a repository and other things in there. Building this is basically like you would at a nuclear power plant. This is how the fuel is stored currently. So it's a pad, it's storage modules, it's the mechanisms to lift that off a transportation canister and move that into the storage mechanisms, security, and things like that. Unknown exactly what that cost is. As you look at some of the reports and other things out there, it's millions of dollars, but not billions of dollars.
Jeremy Dillon, Rad Waste Monitor. How involved is DOE in the funding of it? Are they involved at all, or and how involved are they in kind of the planning of things moving forward?
Well, I think DOE is aware of what we're doing. Have we had formal conversations with them? No, we haven't, and we look forward, I think, pretty soon to doing that. How involved will DOE be? It's their obligation. I mean, they're going to be our customer. They're the ones that has to ship the waste. They're the ones that WCS as well as the state will have to negotiate with as to what the economics of it are. So I think in terms of involvement and importance, obviously DOE ranks at the top of that. But we have not had any formal discussions with anyone in the administration. But I think we'll do that relatively soon.
Thank you. Steve Tatro with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Can you talk about what the role of the county and the state would be or will be on this moving forward? Are they the entities that will have to sign agreements with DOE to agree to host this site and this material? And has there been any discussion locally of the benefits that might accrue to the state or the community for agreeing to do this?
Well, it's going to be a long answer because I got to give you a background. So we operate a low-level radioactive waste facility, and currently, for what we call out-of-compact waste, which is non-Texas Vermont waste, so from 34 other states, the state of Texas gets 25% of our gross revenue, and the county gets 5% of our gross revenue. Last year, for the county, that represented about $3.5 million. It looks like it's going to be about $1 million a quarter, out of a $14-15 million budget. Big deal. So I think they already understand what the potential economics are. They're well versed because we have it in what we're doing now. In terms of the county, the agreement with the county, what they issued says that the county judge will be responsible for negotiating whatever economics they get from this. So the county judge obviously will be involved, but I envision that being an overarching negotiation with the county judge, the state, and WCS to see what DOE has in mind, and we have to have those discussions as well. I think once we don't expect a whole lot of involvement right now with the state of Texas and the leadership of the state of Texas because there's really nothing to sign off on. What we had to do for our low-level facility is we applied for a license, and it took a 5-year period. So we had to convince the state that we could do this safely, and we could do it protective of the environment and our employees as well. And once we did that, they issued the license. We then went into the legislature for 2 sessions in 11 and 13, and they expanded that license on what type of waste because they felt comfortable in the ability that we could do it safely. So I think this will go the same way. I think once we go through the NRC, prove to the NRC that we can do it safely, prove that we can do it, and we can do it in a timely fashion, and then have conversations with DOE to see what the economics of the deal are. Then it goes back to the state, and the state has this bundle that says, okay, you've convinced us you can do it safely. Are the benefits worth it to the state and the county for us to move this along? And that'll happen in either the 2017 legislature or the 2019 legislature. But it's the same process that we went through for low level, and I think it's going to be the same process here. I'm sorry for the long answer.
Jeff Beatty with the Energy Daily. What specifically, I have 2 questions also. What specifically would you need from the legislature at that point? And then secondly, how are you answering concerns that, which you obviously want to be an interim solution, would in practice turn out to be permanent? As you know, nuclear waste tends to, go to one location and stay there for a very long period of time.
I can't imagine that happening. I'll answer the second one first. You wrote down the first one?
Legislation.
Yeah. On the second one, that question came up. I said we had a public meeting in Andrews. That question came up. And interim storage, as you know, is defined for some period greater than 60 years. And for most of us, we're not going to see that end of that period if it goes for the maximum period. All you can do, what we will do and have started to do is just educate. Talk about Yucca Mountain, talk about other repositories, and see where it goes. As you said, 60 years seems like a long time for a lot of people, but I think it's just through education, and I think everyone believes that it needs to be in a permanent deep geological repository, which we're not offering. We're just offering storing it above ground.
So for your first question, what kind of legislation, if any, would be needed in Texas? We're not sure any legislation is actually needed, particularly at this point, when it comes to what the state of Texas expects as a hosting fee or things like that. Typically, that has gone through legislation in Texas and goes through that process to get approved. It doesn't have to happen that way, but that's typically what we've seen.
And the economics, Rod mentioned a hosting fee, and that's been, there's a lot of people have speculated what the format would be. What we do on the low level, as I said, is the state shares in our revenue. And we find that to be, other than being very expensive, we find that to be a positive way to go because it creates a partnership between us and the state of Texas. And they're motivated for us to succeed because they are getting a percentage of our revenues as well. And I would hope and envision that we can create the same thing here as well.
Someone who hasn't had a chance to ask a question.
Diane DeRigo, Nuclear Monitor. Well, I just wanted to ask one question. What is it?
One more quick question. Have you heard anything from legislators yet about your proposal, whether or not any of the legislators that signed on to the Nuclear Waste Administration Act of 2013 have come out in support of it, whether they've contacted you at all, any sort of consultation with that proposal?
I don't know if we've talked to them about that proposal. I'd have to talk to the people here in D.C. We have talked to all the Texas delegation about what our plans are. We've talked to some of the key leaders in Congress about what our plans are. But in terms of how what we're doing fits into the overall administration's management of fuel, I'm not aware of it.
Elaine Hiruo, Platts, you had mentioned you intend to file the application in 2017. 16, pardon me. Could you kind of walk us through what work yet has to be done, any further site characterization, design of the facility, capacity, things of that nature? Thank you.
Can I take this? If you want. No, I'd like to take some of it. Okay. So I noticed in NEI's comments that they said 10 years to site a facility. It's interesting that we follow up with 5 years. The reason being is I think everyone looks at the 10 years. I think OAB came up with 10 years as well. The reason is I think the assumption is it's just a site. You know, you get a piece of property, and you got to go through characterization. You got to go through the storage systems. You got to go through. You know, you got to do all of your communication and all that as well. We spent 5 years getting a license and characterizing that property. We say in a lot of our releases that we have the most characterized piece of property on the face of the earth. We've done 600 borings. We have 400 monitoring wells. We know exactly what is underneath and in that ground below us, and it's just a lot of clay, red bed clay, 600 feet of it. So I think we'll have to update that environmental study, obviously. There could well be some different standards for the federal versus the state. But you know, we spent over $100 million doing that characterization during that 5-year period. So I don't expect, when you try to reconcile between the 5 years and the 10 years, I think that's a large piece of it. Because I think we have a head start, a dramatic head start on that as well. In terms of the idea of working with Areva and the ability maybe to use their license for licensing the interim storage, the systems and the canisters and all that. There's the license that already exists for that because they have licenses for already on-site storage. So that would be a benefit if we do formalize our agreement and use them as a partner as well. The process will be, I think we're already in the middle of preparing the license. And we'll have a preliminary meeting with NRC, I would imagine, pretty shortly, and then probably another couple of meetings before we actually file the license application to make sure that we're on board with what both of us expect to produce.
Do you have a ballpark figure on the total storage capacity of the facility? You mentioned it'll be done in stages, but up to...
We haven't, and you know the transportation obviously plays a key in it as well as how quickly can you ship and get things in. As Rod said, it's 10,000 cubic feet
For phase one.
for phase one.
Metric tons.
Metric tons, I'm sorry. We believe that's enough to deal with whatever Texas plants can ship and the facilities that are shut down.
We will also note on my right, we've got a timeline, and that shows how we developed our low-level application and kind of where we got to this point. And the bottom part of that is going from the submittal of the license through opening. If you take a closer look at that, that's also in your press package. And for everybody on the phone who can't see these are also in your press packages, and you can go online to WCS Storage, WCS STORAGE, WCS.com and download the press package that's here in the room today.
Jeremy Dillon, Rad Waste Monitor. I know, so commercial spent nuclear fuel has kind of been the main focus, but is DOE high-level waste part of the plan to accept at the facility? And if so, are they going to be stored on the same pad, or is there going to be kind of some distinction between the two?
We will file an application that would be for either. Our focus is on the permanently shut down plants in Texas at this point. But as those discussions happen with DOE, we'll find out if there's an interest there and how that impacts this plan as well.
I'm sorry, your focus is only on the plants in Texas, or the plants in Texas plus all the decommissioned plants?
Both.
Yeah.
Annalie Grant, SNL Energy. Can you tell me a bit about the physical makeup of the facility, the security that will be there, and at what point in the storage process will fuel actually be sent to this facility?
Yeah, so the low-level facilities right now do not have the storage and things, the security and things that we will have for the high-level facility. For the high-level facility, it'll be similar to a nuclear power plant, independent spent fuel storage facility installation, and it'll have 24/7 guards, cameras, other items to secure that fuel. Ours will have the same processes and systems in place. And so as you look at our timeline, after we get our license, we would have approximately a year or so to construct the facility, and then we'd be able to start taking fuel at the end of 2020, according to our timeline.
Jeff Beatty with Energy Daily. I wanted to ask Mr. McMahon if you could elaborate a little bit more on AREVA's role and specifically what the existing licenses that you have that would be used as part of this process.
Sure. So our role is, as Rod said, to support the license application for the initial facility. What we're doing is taking our already licensed systems that now currently house used nuclear fuel and provide them to WCS to make the complete package. So they're bringing the site that's well characterized. We're bringing the already licensed systems. So it should be a very straightforward process to bring those two together and to get the licensing document in really quickly. And again, the site's well characterized and the systems already hold fuel. There are not a lot of uncertainties out there, and we see a very straightforward process going forward.
I'm sorry, then that raises a question. Does this mean that the fuel would have to be packaged in the AREVA packages that would be covered under the license before it leaves the reactor site and is shipped to a storage facility?
I think we would envision that whoever is engaged to build the storage facility on our site could accept all of the different packages, whether it's NAC or whether it's Holtec or whether it's AREVA.
Thank you, Steve Tatro again, Las Vegas Review-Journal. I'm trying to picture what this is going to look like. Is this going to be row upon row of dry casks, or is it more complicated?
No, you're right. It's row upon row of dry casks, and there is a graphic in your press package and online at WCSstorage.com. But basically, it'll look just like you would see them at nuclear power plants today, just on a larger scale, because we would consolidate many of those independent ones into one consolidated system.
Seeing no other hands, thank you all for...
Let me make one more statement. I'm sorry, because I promised Tim Smith that I would get this out, because I don't think it's been said, because we haven't had to answer the question. Why we're so confident we can do this is, as I said, when I went back to the low-level facility, that law was the low-level law was passed in 1980, and from 1980 to 2005, 25 years, there were 10 attempts to site a low-level facility around the country with about $1 billion spent. They were all state-controlled, non-consent-based. Every one of them failed. In 2005, we came along as a private enterprise and tried to do the same thing. We were the only one, as we said, the first one to be successful. I just draw the parallels to what we're doing here with the spent fuel as well. This has been tried by the federal government, and what we're offering is a private enterprise outside the Beltway trying to provide an innovative way to solve the problem that's escaped this country for decades.
Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.